right, so I'm on here with Coach Kristyn Smith. Thank you, Chris, for coming back onto my podcast.
I am happy to be here.
We're gonna have you as a sub 3 hour runner and running coach on here. You've done Boston. This is gonna be your seventh time. So let's hop into the course and talk about everything. Anyone that hasn't run Boston or the ones that even have run Boston but didn't perform as well as they should have. Let's talk about that course and see how you can best navigate it.
Yes, so I'm going to open up the map. Here we go. So overall, a couple of stats. The race is a net downhill. The net of the downhill is 460 feet. There is a significant amount of climbing. There is 815 feet of climbing. So that descent then is 1,275 feet. I say that because people have different definitions of downhill. That can encompass many different types of courses. Boston is correct in that it is a net downhill. However, that 815 feet of climbing is not easy. And particularly when it comes, those Newton Hills, it is late in the race and they are stacked together back to back to back to back. So that's what makes it complicated. But we will just go through the course. I like to just break things down in little pieces so you have an order of operations in your brain so you can sort of chart things out as you go along the day. The race is a point-to-point course. You start in the west and you travel east towards Boston, which is right on the harbor, as I say, on the water. And so that is the direction of the course overall. You will start in Hopkinton. The first mile of the course is the largest downhill of the entire day. So don't be surprised when you're getting off the starting line and you are rapidly tossed into a descent. It is 139 feet down in that first mile, and that is a negative 4.3% grade. So it's not small. And also within that first mile, you have a 40-foot climb. I like to say the first mile is representative of the entire course in that there is basically nothing flat on this course. You are not just traveling 0-0 for any significant distance in this course. You are going down, you are going up, you are going down, you are going up continuously over and over for 26.2 miles or 42K. So that first mile really encapsulates the entire race. From that first 5K, really it's the overall net of that first 5K is downhill. And there is, as I mentioned, some ups, but overall net downhill. From the next 5K, you have Ashland and Framingham, and that is essentially the flattest section of the course. It is not flat, but it is the flattest section for Boston. And so this is really one of those places where you can start to settle in. The other great part about particularly Framingham, which comes right at the 10K mark, is this is when the course begins to open up. So early on, the first 10K of the race, you should not be surprised if you are boxed in. You should not be surprised if you feel like you're a little congested and you cannot get your full stride. You cannot get into your full flow. That is to be expected. I do not recommend trying to push around people. I do not recommend trying to get anxious and waste energy trying to dart around. Instead, I recommend just being patient. The marathon's a long race. So, if you have to be patient in the first 10K, that's an okay place to be patient. And then it starts to open up. The roads become much wider. They really double in width as you go along. So again, there's no reason to get panicked. Just go with the flow. Once you get through that first 10K, there is an overall climb and then an overall drop. And again, these things happen in small pieces, but also in larger chunks. So there's a climb from 9.5 to 11.25. And this is one of those long gradual uphills. And then you have a long gradual downhill from 11.25 to mile 13.1. This is going from Natick through Wellesley. This part of the course, really, it's you can start to get into a rhythm. People are going to start to spread out a lot more. Um, as I mentioned, because there are so many ups and downs, you really want to start to go your own pace. Don't try to chase people. If you're slowing down a little bit on the uphills, that's fine. Some people prefer to do that and then use the downhill as their extra little power boost. You need to really use your own judgment. And as I recommend for everybody, really, this entire race should be effort based. So hopefully as you've been training, you know what effort should feel like for marathon pace. You know what effort should feel like on hilly terrain. Hopefully you've been doing training on hilly terrain and you know what to expect with the undulations, the ups and the downs, and how your body best responds to that. So really start to internalize what you are doing and how you are feeling and how your marathon pace should feel. This is what you should do. But especially once you're about at the halfway point of the race, hopefully you have a good sense of how things are going. There's a large downhill. The second largest downhill comes from mile 15.4, and this is 125 feet down. This is a negative 3.4% grade. This is as you are leaving Wellesley and you are heading into what's called Lower Newton Falls. So this is a huge turning point for the race. And really what I recommend people, instead of breaking the course down into one half and the second half at 13.1, I like to tell people to break the course down into the first half, which is the first 16 miles, and then the second half, which is 16 miles to the end. The reason being, the strategy should really change from these 2 points. The course is overall and net downhill for the first 16 miles. From 16 to the end, it changes completely. So that's why I break the course down there instead of at 13.1. There's nothing distinctive that occurs at 13.1. No change. It just happens to be mathematically half of the distance, right? But from a course and a strategy perspective, there's nothing there. So I don't recommend people actually break it down that way in terms of strategy or race prep. So once you've headed from in this huge downhill, 125 feet, into Lower Newton Falls, that's when you begin the Newton Hills. The Newton Hills are 4 climbs. Everybody's heard of Heartbreak Hill, but that is the last hill in the line. There are 3 preceding climbs, and these 3 preceding climbs are all difficult and challenging on their own. And then you stack them together and you put Heartbreak, the biggest and the hardest, at the end, and that is what makes this complicated, right? So people who haven't studied the course or haven't run the race can get into this train of thought going, oversimplifying and going, well, it's a downhill course and there's a hill called Heartbreak Hill, and that in their brain is the course. That is not the course. If you think that's all it is, man, you are in for some surprises, and it's not in a good way. So really, these 4 hills combined, 4 hills occurring from mile 16, lasting all the way until mile 21. This is when you have to lock in and you have to mentally tell yourself, your mind and your legs, to push and get the best out of it, right? I don't recommend people try to maintain pace on uphills. These uphills are significant. However, you do have to try to maintain some effort, right? And so that can be mentally challenging. The hill grades are in this order: 2.2%, 4.1%, 2%, and then 4%. Heartbreak Hill, as I mentioned, is that last climb, and that is a 95-foot climb over 0.45, so just a little under 800 meters. It's a lot of people could do that in training or could do that in a race and not think much of it. But you have all of this downhill proceeding, and then heartbreak is the culmination at mile 21. So it is compounding of factors, right? Physically, your legs have been through a lot by the time they get to that point. Once you get to the crest of Heartbreak Hill, as I mentioned, that's right at mile 21. There's a long gradual downhill that lasts for essentially 3 miles from mile 21 to 24, and that is overall 200 feet down. So hopefully, if you've paced well up to that point, this is when you really go for broke and you turn on the jets. This is where your race is really made. If you're going to PR and have a good day, this is where it is. If you have not paced well, then this is where you will see people around you completely falling apart, like physically, cramps, walking, all kinds of, strains and those things. This is where you will see all of that. Hopefully that is not you and you are just sailing through. But this is where the body really starts to feel every bit of what you've put it through. The race has a couple of small inclines there at the end. There's three in particular. I do like to note them. They're not challenging on their own. Like the biggest one is 20 feet. So elevation wise, this is not a huge number, but you are doing these climbs in mile 25 of a very physically demanding race, and that's what makes it difficult. So the climbs are going over the Mass Turnpike towards the Sit-Go sign. Then there's a climb that goes under the Charles Gate Bridge. And then there's a climb that goes up Hereford. And again, these are very small, 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet. But it's just because of where they are. Once you make that turn on from Hereford onto Boylston, you have 600 meters to go until the finish. And it's a 600-meter straightaway. You can see the finish down there. There's flags lining the entire course. There's spectators on the sidelines, 6, 7, 8 deep. There's a huge rush of adrenaline and energy. And so this is one of those moments really where I think whatever kind of day you're having, good, bad, in the middle, this is where you want to soak it in and enjoy every bit of what makes Boston special. And what part of really what makes Boston special is the spectators. It's hard to sort of focus on them a lot earlier in the race because a lot of us are going to be focused on how we're feeling, making sure we're fueling and hydrating and not going too fast and not going too slow and all of these things. But in that last 600 meters on Boylston, that is when you can really look outward and say, wow, this is incredible. What an honor to be a part of this, right? And I think it's one of the best finish lines in the world, probably, at least that I've done. And that's why I keep coming back. So, but overall, if you've prepared well, if you've trained in a way that is specific to this course, which as I mentioned, really is uphills and downhills, then you should find yourself in a good place on marathon day.
Thank you, Coach Kristyn. This is an amazing summary of this race, and I like how you captured also that it is a congested race that does open up. Besides that, so now we've covered the course. You've probably, as you said, listened to what's going on with the weather. Is this going to be a good day? And we're talking about a week beforehand.
It looks good so far. I will caveat this to say that the temperature has been creeping up. I would like it to creep in the other direction. But so far it still looks good. So what it looks to be right now is there looks to be a couple of warming front days on either side, which are red flags to me because they are creeping higher and higher into like the 70s. And I ran last year, 2024, when it was over 70 and it was quite miserable. Especially, I will also add that I live in New York City, and we have had a like a very brutal winter. So most days I was out training, it was 20 degrees. That's not an exaggeration, like 20 degrees Fahrenheit. It was very cold. And so to have, all of the sudden race day be warm, it would definitely be a shock to my system and for most of us training in this part of the world. So yeah, for me, I'm happy if it's in the 40s, if it doesn't get above 55, that would be wonderful in my dream. But like right now it has been constantly shifting and it has been creeping warmer. Hopefully we don't get any more creep.
Yes, yes, and I agree with you. I was there last year, and even for somebody coming from Florida, it was a shockingly hot temperature. And if that happens, I guess you gotta just shift goals and just enjoy the race, and maybe think about a backup race that you've been thinking about.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that was the overall from last year. It was like just do your best and smile. You get through it. But yes, I think, like I said, I think things still look to be pretty good. So I'm remaining hopeful. I'll remain hopeful until the last minute.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Kristen. And then how can people find you if they want to get in touch with you?
Yes. So my website, I will spell it because it's a little more there's multiple ways to spell Chris, right? So it's Coach Chris, but Kris and then rs.com. That's my website. And yes, I hope, if you Google my name, I usually for coach wise, I go by Coach Chris with a K. And yeah, hopefully people will find me. As I mentioned, I live in New York City, so if you have a fall race and it's New York City Marathon, that's also my jam. Come to me for that.
Yes, and we've had you on the podcast for that before, and you've gone really into detail about that race as well. So thank you so much. I'm going to link everything in the descriptions below, and then thank you to everybody, and good luck.
Yes, good luck.
Thanks for tuning in. For more information, go to www.marathonrunningpodcast.com or check us out on all channels.